Welcome back, everybody, to me drinking beer at noon because it's, well, almost Christmas. No, it's because I'm an alcoholic, is what it is. Anyway, my point is we're back to talk more Assail, chapters 7 and 8 to be exact. It's what I finished this morning, and I'm recording this, so I have something for maybe Christmas Eve. I don't know when I'll upload it, depending on how much time I have to edit, because I'll be going to visit some family, and I have no idea if I'll be able to record any videos over the next couple of days. So this may be the last one before Christmas is over. If that is the case, have great fucking holidays, whether you celebrate like the Christian death cult or any other thing, you're good. Have fun, do something cool, don't get the plague, stay away from rats, and if you have rats, make sure they don't have those fleas, and well, that's the wrong plague, isn't it? Anyway, what I'm saying is, have great holidays. Thank you all for actually watching this, all 25 people that usually watch these videos. I highly appreciate you, and I also appreciate everyone else. So thank you all, and let's do this, shall we? Well, cheers. All right, so what do we have to talk about today with those two chapters, chapters 7 and 8? There's a lot going on in those two chapters. In general, this is like a relatively fast-paced book, all in all, I feel like. You know, with all the stuff that's going on there. So let's find out. First of all, obviously, I'm so glad we meet Coots and Badlands again. Really cool dudes, right? I mean, we kind of met them already at the end of the last chapter, but now they have that conversation of what went on and that they could actually leave any time, which is what they do. Now, what's interesting there is something else, and that is the Bone Right, who's not a Bone White, but a Bone Right, which tells us one thing. Spelling is fucking important. So yeah, and we learned that it was set there by the Jaghut. The Jaghut used the Bone Right, to guard the approach to the north, which is where they went. So, like, you know, we're getting, like, finally, and it's once again, like, the kind of thing that I like it to look at is how the novel is structured, is like how we as readers kind of know already what's going on, right? Jaghut went to the north, some of them mingled with humans, and, you know, and those groups try to protect themselves against genocide, which is something that, you know, most people are trying to not suffer from. And they did that. By all kinds of means, trying to make sure the Talani Mass could not reach them. Does it work? I don't know. We'll see. Point is, that's why the Bone White is there. And we come to an important aspect here, and something I will look at again and again in the overall Malazan world, which is the idea that Coots and Bandit's like, yeah, Jaghut, who believes in fucking Jaghut? They're like a legend, if at all. A story to frighten children, ghosts and ghoulies. But the Talani Mass are real. And the interesting thing there is that with what happened at the beginning, or at the end of Path to Ascendancy, and at the rise of the Empire, that being Kellanved, the Emperor, raised back up, or took control of the First Throne, took over the Talani Mass, and with all of that reawakened in a way, a lot of these older, like, beings, older species, bringing those conflicts back to life, because, and this is the other thing that we learn over the whole of the Malazan Book of the Fallen and the novel of the Malazan Empire and all of that stuff. All those conflicts are still very much unresolved, right? Like whatever's going on in the Carcanas trilogy is still unresolved. All the great war between the Jaghut and the Imas is still unresolved. All those old conflicts have just lain dormant, and through humans, these fucking humans, to quote someone else that I really appreciate, through these fucking humans, they are now dragged back into the open, and this is sort of like the fallout of what we see more on Esslemont's side of the Malazan world, right? Like when it comes to the novels, like the novels of the Malazan Empire show a lot of these other open conflicts that are still kind of being resolved. Not that, like, dealing with the crippled god is not also dealing with one specific long dormant kind of festering wound or old conflict. And I guess that's sort of like the thing that we need to figure out here in general is like, we should try to, take care of all conflicts and whatnot and not let stuff lie and fester, because otherwise following generations will be dragged into this again and again and again. And that's like the other side of what we see here, especially in Assail. You have all these people that know shit about it, right? You have the people of the wind, the silent people, the people of the yellow grass, I think. Yeah, those. That are all being slaughtered by the clan en masse. And they don't even know that. I mean, they kind of have like legends that they're related to those people up in the north, but that's just that's just all that it is, right? And so they have like no actual part in those conflicts. Now, does that ring familiar bells? Yes, it does, because dealing with our past is something that we as humans also need to figure out, right? It's like, I don't know. I live in a country that was pretty big on genocide just like 2 generations ago. 3? I don't know. I'm not good with generations, but about 80 years ago, we were pretty big in genocide and did something that is really fucking horrible, and it has tinged our history and our memory a lot. And there's people out there who try to forget that stuff, but you can't ever forget that kind of shit. You just need to find out how to live with your past, how to look forward while not forgetting the past and taking the past as a warning. And we see people holding on to the past without looking forward into the future. We see people forgetting the past. We see all of that, all of these different ways of us to how we could deal with history, history as opposed to historiography, obviously, in these books. Once again, it makes a lot of sense because we have like that broad of a scope. It's like you have people with history, that history will come crawling back and will probably bite you in the arse. So there is that bit. Then there's interesting things because our mystery man, our mystery-ticed Andy, knows how to do the Ghislaine, how to do the corralled Ghislaine even. And we find out in the fight against the Bone Right. But possibly in other situations as well. Like later on we find him doing more corralled Ghislaine. Now that is interesting because if we're like on the Fisher side of things, we're like, who could that motherfucker be, right? And yeah, well, there's a bunch of like theories out there, and I'm not going to speculate right now, but I'm just saying like one of the candidates that a lot of people think he might be does never ever wield corralled Ghislaine in the Malazan novels. That's just one thing, right? Just saying. But that's all for now on that thing. There's a conversation later on in chapter 8, where he talks with Fisher about the Mane of Chaos and Anomander Rake and stuff, where there might be some circumstantial evidence that it is really Anomander Rake being reborn or regurgitated, I guess. Spat out again, doing the Mother Dark style Jonah. Maybe not. But yeah, I'm not going to speculate here in this video because I don't know. However, one thing that I wanted to look at is once again the way the whole Bone Right thing is working with Coots and Badlands, because it's a masterpiece of this like small vignette of horror comedy, because like Coots and Badlands are just really cool like buddy comedy kind of thing, and it's really funny. I love them for that. But they're also badass, which helps. Plus, you have the whole, like, over-the-top kind of almost like Army of Darkness, Evil Dead style bone monster stuff going on. And it's Cam Esslemont's skill to make it scary and epic on the one hand, but also kind of fucking ridiculous at the same time. That's sort of like what makes good comedy, horror comedy, work. And I feel that scene overall is doing exactly that. So, what else is happening in those chapters? As I said, there's a lot goes on, but well, let's try and focus on a few of those things. Kyle and gang, well, Leanne and Doran, uh, are obviously leaving further north, and we have that scene where people are dragging their ships along there. And like one thing that I found interesting when I said like spoke earlier about the idea of like it being like gold rush, which reminds of the U.S. Of the U.S. Well, America, North America in the 19th century, in a way, with the gold rush, going to Alaska, going to California, wherever, being ridiculously ruthless and terrible. The other side is obviously that Viking side, which is sort of in the legend of those steppe-dwelling people. You have the silent people saying that there is obviously the halls of in Jurgenheim, those halls of the Jaghut. Where you feast and battle every day with the ancestors. And like, does that sound kind of familiar to you? I don't know. It sounds more fun than most retirement homes. I have to grant them that, but still, I don't know. Just wanted to point that out when it comes to how both Cam Esslemont and Erickson, when they built that world and looked at their cultures, tried to mingle all kinds of different aspects to make those cultures feel unique and not just, these are our Viking equivalents. These are our highly disgusting, filled with Orientalist cliches, Arab equivalents in the Forgotten Realms, which we're not talking about because they're full of racism. Anyway, not what I wanted to do. My point, however, is another one, and that is we have that whole conversation, that whole situation. I mean, we have two of those. One is Kyle walking into that desert of dust and fighting that dust wind demon thing when it comes to Osurk, to the sword, to Whiteblade. There's two things going on there. One of them is that it's apparently an artifact of chaos, which, well, chaos exists, and thus can destroy these manifestations like that wind demon thing or the lady earlier on manifestation, because I guess if you have a manifestation of chaos, an artifact of chaos, it probably destroys all kinds of structures, and any form of like summoning, sending, whatever is a structure like imposed on reality, and it dissolves all of that, which makes it a pretty fucking powerful and dangerous tool to hang around. But the other thing that I wanted to look at is a bit of philosophy, right? that bit of philosophy is obviously that Kyle's like, this is a sword, it belonged to Osurk, and the demon's like, this is not a sword. And it's like, yeah, it's an immensely powerful thing that you just got given by an ascendant, but it is sword shaped, so you think it's a sword, which means that when we look at like getting like once again, this is like a cross-culture misunderstanding kind of thing, right? So what happens is we see things that are unfamiliar to us, and we use them, or we categorize them according to our knowledge and our expectation. So when we see something sword-shaped, we call it sword, even though it may be something else. And over all of history, we've had situations where people got found stuff that they couldn't like place or didn't know our use or meaning for, so or their original use or meaning for, and then used them for something else. And it's like, on the other hand, basically what archaeologists do when they dig up stuff from, I don't know, the Neolithicum or older than that, Paleolithic stuff. It's like, we don't know how that shit works, especially when it comes to all kinds of odd tools and artifacts, which is why you always say they have cultish, they had like a cultish use. They're ritualist purposes is what we use in those situations. So that's just something that I wanted to look at. The other thing, however, that we need to look at is clan en masse slaughtering indigenous people. Now, why is that interesting? For one, there is the situation when Silver Fox arrives and she thinks about it, is like, if that's all that we've done all the time, And then later on, these wars that were always slaughtering women and children, and we've known that because we've seen like all these flashbacks and whatnot to the Clan Mass wars. In Memories of Ice, the prologue, here in the prologue, in other situations. But in our legends of our people and so forth, these are glorious battles and shit, right? And that's a terrible thing, but it's something that is true. It's like you go and read your classic myths and legends, right? You go and read your Iliad. And while the sacking of Troy is described there, it is still very much like, at least in translations that we today use, it's very much like softened up. Whereas what basically happens is, well, more or less something between mass rape, mass slaughter, and genocide every single fucking time. And then we think of it as like glorious, epic. Legends, basically. And I think it's important to be aware of that. It's something that we tend to forget or tend to gloss over because it's we live through stories, right? And after, like, we tend to interpret everything in stories. And while our stories have become rather grimdark over the last couple of centuries, like, stuff that's further in the past tends to be drawn in like warmer colors and softer lines, and we gloss over a lot of stuff. But human struggle has always been human struggle. We've always gone out and done terrible things to each other. We've always killed a lot of people, right? Just because it's like described in a like poetic way in Europe by Homer or whoever, doesn't mean that hanging around Troy and killing each other wasn't absolutely gruesome, horrible, and probably unnecessary. And it's important to be aware of that, and it's something that Silver Fox, in a fairly unique way, gets shown because the people killing those tribesfolk are the same people that went and did all those glorious deeds in Clan Mass legends in the past. Which makes Clan Mass a very, very interesting and powerful tool, because, once again, they even remember that it was always horrible. It's sort of like one of the reasons why the Clan Mass are so fucking traumatized when you look at like all that stuff in, you know, here it's not so clear, but there's parts in Dust of Dreams and not Dust of Dreams, mostly in the Crippled God, I guess, where we see that in like Clan Mass thoughts on like how terrible that kind of knowledge and weight is, because I guess that's one aspect of why we and how we turn, or not like how, but why we turn history into legend, into story, and change it in a lot of ways. It's to avoid trauma. It's to avoid that kind of trauma, right? It's sort of like why everyone in Germany says like their grandparents or great grandparents were obviously not Nazis. They were either had to follow orders or they were in the resistance, which is, well, not true, but it's like the kind of stories we tell ourselves to live with all the trauma of the past, because as a species in general, and not just only as Germans, but as a species in general, we've been pretty fucking horrible to each other forever. And if we're like always aware of that, it kind of tends to crush the spirit. Spirit crushing, well, while being an amazing song by Death on their last album, Spirit Crusher, which you totally should go and check out. Sound of Perseverance by Death, an amazing piece of music. Anyway, while Spirit Crushing being cool in that regard is otherwise something to be avoided, because it leads to all kinds of problems, which we don't want to have around here, right? One other aspect, though, that I wanted to look at is the conversation between Kilava and Silver Fox, about how those two interact. There's obviously a lot of tension there. Kilava is one of my favorite and most fascinating characters in the Malazan world. I wish we had more stuff on her. I kind of hope she maybe shows up in Walk in Shadow. Who knows? But I feel the interesting thing there is, once again, Silver Fox dealing with all these different expectations, being crushed by those different expectations of her function, right? I mean, that's sort of like the tragedy of Silver Fox, is that person has never ever had any chance to be a normal human being. There's been such high expectations, a lot of pressure, um, talk about terrible parents, all of that stuff, and we can see how it has deformed her, traumatized her as a person, which, just terrible and sad. And we see the same thing going on here with Kilava and Silver Fox, with both of them trying to prevent the genocide of those people, but in different ways. And Kilava being way more assertive about a lot of things, which I guess is the power imbalance that comes with age. I mean, Kilava is kind of ancient in a lot of ways. But yeah, I feel it's an important thing to look at, and probably warrants more watching later on when they interact some more, hopefully, in the next couple of chapters. Yeah. Another thing, obviously, is that we attend the point where Kyle's people are slaughtered. And this is a general theme of this book that I wanted to look at, which is repetition, or not repetition, but it has a wave pattern in its storytelling, right? We have people going from east to west. No, it's northeast they're going, right? Anyway, we have people going all in the same direction, and we have, like, in our narrative, we have several groups that are traveling the same direction, encountering sometimes the same kind of people, situations, or whatnot, but one after the other. And that gives this, like, wave pattern, like waves running up on a beach and, falling back into the sea, which is, futility, if ever I saw it. Sort of, maybe. Point is, however, that we see that pattern here. It's like Kyle wanders. He doesn't actually go into the land of the people of the wind, which is his clans, because he arrives a bit too far east. And he just meets the people of the silent people, and then that plain of dust and whatnot, the vanishing plain, vanishing lands. On the other hand, we know that one clan further on is his people, and beyond that are the people of the grass, and of the yellow grass. And we see the clan Imas and the Silver Fox and Kilava following that same track further on. It's like all of those travels, all of those end up at those mountains up there in the north, the Salt Range, and whatever is going on there. I mean, we kind of know that there's like a Jaghood matriarch living there. There's also Forkroll Assail living there. It's probably the last retreat of all those different groups, and that's, like, I think the other side of this is, right. We have we're missing Chain Jamal here, but apart from that, we have Jaghood, we have Clanimas, we have Forkroll Assail, all of them congregating one final time in the north, somewhere up in those mountains. And we'll see how that ends at the end of the book, I guess. However, another one of those wave patterns, so to speak, is can be seen when it comes to the sea travels. Remember when we first meet Duke, whatever, that guy, the Falaran with the blind wife. And we just meet them after they cross the Guardian Rocks and enter the city of Ruse. It's like our first wave, and we follow them in their narrative along the sea coast there and so forth, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But now we also meet the next group, which is Tula, whatever, the crew with which Kyle came over, the mare galley, and they're doing the same thing, and we follow them going through the Guardian Rocks, and behind them is the galley, the ship of the Crimson Guard, going the same route. And we have like all these groups also follow the same travel, the same journey, encountering similar events. And I find I like this a lot, because on the one hand, it gives Cam Esslemont a way to build up tension, build up expectations, and so forth. On the other hand, it shows the passing of time, right? When we have that first group with Cartheron and all of those guys and enter Ruse, we see them doing their pirate, like being attacked by the pirates in that harbor. Now, when the next crew comes through, we have all those pirates sitting out there and blockading the Narrows to do the same thing, because they had to react to what happened before when their halberd chain got blown off and everything. So we see there is time passing, events are happening in the world outside of, or like the world is reacting to what our main characters are doing, which is always really good. It's what you strive for when you're running a tabletop RPG as well, is that the world moves on even if your players are not looking and is reacting to your players. So we have that. On the other hand, we have a description of, because when we look at it for the first time, we see they have just passed the Guardian Rocks, and we have a description of it being harrowing as fuck. Now we actually have the perspective of the actual travel, which once again gives obviously Cam Esslemont the chance to talk about like ships a lot, the ship maneuvering. In this case, a galley. I guess it would also work for like an open like Viking ship, that kind of boat where you have a bunch of people rowing. Your classic Greek Roman galley with like the different rowing speeds for, you know, what you do, like ramming speed and all these great things, what you do when you row to go into like sea battle and other things. So it's once again just well done. We'll see where it's going, because now Storval has taken over and he's evil. And there's another thing that we need to look at. In two places we have a lot of Stormguard out there, and this I feel is once again where we come to the colonialism kind of like America kind of parallel. We have seen a lot of large conflicts just end, right? The whole like crippled god stuff going down in Lether and beyond. The events of Stonewielder happened just a bit ago in Corel and Fist. We have, I mean, well, Blood and Bone, and there's not that much that comes out of Jack of Ruku, but still, so what we have is a lot of people that had a lot of purpose and very specific functions, some of those religious, some of those not, suddenly all running around without anything to do. No proper jobs apart from fighting. And you can fight for the good, or you can fight for yourself, and you can do all these things. And this is, I feel like, one thing that we should also realize with a lot of these situations when you have a gold rush or whatever, is like people that are drawn there are obviously poor people, but also a lot of people that have fought, like veterans, so to speak. Veterans, survivors, cashiered soldiers, people that have lived a life of violence that will, whether you want that or not, disassociate you, take you away from normal civilization, because that's what being a soldier, that's what being a fighter does, because you need to, you know, wear down or learn to overcome your like human inhibitions when it comes to killing other people and so forth. You know, that kind of stuff that happens when you're a soldier, when you're exposed to a lot of trauma through war and whatnot. It's not easy to fit in with like normal human society after that. But going into these kind of places that are once again like high conflict areas is, for a lot of those people, the only option, right? They're out of a job. They have like no skills they can use apart from like fighting, which you can use to rob or whatever. They're kind of addicted to violence, probably also to other stuff, and yeah, so that's sort of what the kind of people you get in those like high risk ventures out there. And you can see that here with, as I said, the Stormguard and the Genebacans and all of those people showing up there. The other side, however, is that a lot of those, especially those who were not just paid to fight, like the Stormguard, like maybe the Blue Shields and a bunch of those groups, they still carry those conflicts with them in their hearts, which is why, you know, the Stormguard, the former Stormguard, has a couple of axes to grind with our good buddy Kyle Whiteblade, because, you know, he kind of killed the lady, or he helped at least, so they're not exactly happy about him showing up. And that will lead to a lot of further tensions in those areas. So this is, once again, something that I feel is interesting to look at. All right, then let's look at something more. Ormond's tale, right? So he follows Jess, he encounters Lucci Bane, and Lucci plays the old game. Also, he plays treachery, which is he cheats when Ormond wants to trade both Tooth or Swalfbrul, whatever, however you pronounce that, for Jess's life. That doesn't work. Lucci is an asshole. Lucci is also psychotic and all kinds of other things. And we see, first of all, we have an interesting situation, which is we meet Calbrin. Well, he just gives his name as Cal, but those of us who have read Path to Ascendancy know that he's Calbrin, because he's a... Good question where he's from. He's dark-skinned is what he is. So I assume he's from Dolhan. Anyway, he's a mage, and he saves Ormond, and Ormond tries to go and warn the older people, because there's a large army coming to the north, and he wants to find that oldest Iceblood to ask him for help and so forth. Now, there's a few things going on there that I feel are interesting to look at, and that are, once again, emblematic for how the Malazan world works. And that is, there's different times and different conflicts. There's an interesting thing as you go and read like someone like Charles Taylor. He talks about like secular time, sacred time, and whatnot. And that is that depending on your like mindset, the problem you're tackling and whatnot, we as humans, or like whatever, can live in different forms of time, and with those different forms of time come different conflicts, different issues, different problems, right? Like a sacral time would be our time ordered by our beliefs, whether it's our Christian holidays, you know, Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, the good stuff there, or whatever other form of belief you have. That's your sacral time, and it works in a different way than getting up to work every morning and so forth. Time moves different depending on how we think about stuff. That's the one thing. We encounter that when Ormond talks to the oldest, the elder there, whose name I have forgotten. The guy who's called Winter. Anyway, because he's like, there's a great danger coming, and I'm preparing for that. That is their spiritual, ancestral time and problems he's thinking in. Now, we already know that that is actually very much real, because it's the approach of the Tlan Mass that he's preparing for, because, you know, that's what it all boils down to. But because he's focusing so much on that, and that's the only times world he lives in, what that means is that he's completely overlooking the very, very real secular trouble that is heading up the hills with that one army of mercenaries that are coming for the gold. And he just doesn't even understand it. It's like, with their like short-term, like short-sightedness and greed and whatnot. It's like, yeah, you may find all of that very despicable, because you're embroiled in that like age-old conflict that is still going on, that titanic age-old conflict. That doesn't stop some gold-digging mercenary from killing you, however. And that's sort of the problem that we encounter when we have, like, once again, interactions between different cultures. That if we are not, like, thinking and acting on the same way, in the same time, so to speak, that leads to all kinds of terrible outcomes. We'll see what happens with this one in the next couple of chapters, however. I just wanted to point that out. It also happens, like, it's on both sides, because it's exactly what happens later on when Fisher and the Lost Brothers, Coots and Badlands, come to that fort that is attacked besieged by gold diggers and fortune seekers, and they try to help those people. They send those mercenaries, and that could be Fisher's old gang, packing. But because Coots and Badlands are seen as Icebloods, they then get attacked by the people they tried to rescue, because those people are also locked in their personal conflict, right? They're lowlanders, they're fighting Icebloods, and that hatred is beyond everything else, which, once again, is like, if we're stuck in the wrong mindset and the wrong time frame, that leads to a lot of problems. And I think that's like the overarching theme of a lot of these books is be aware of the greater picture, of the grander picture. Set aside those petty conflicts to solve the greater problem. Something that we should maybe do as a species when it comes to fighting global pandemics, global warming, and all the other good stuff. But who knows? Now, where am I going with this, though? Coot's death, which is ridiculously sad, like tragic. It's horrible. But I had an idea, like not an idea, but something that resonated with me is like when we have Coot's burial, he's tied to that tree with the arrow sticking in him, and then Fisher is singing sort of the praise and so forth. That really reminds me of the death of Boromir in Lord of the Rings. Whether it like the beginning of the Two Towers, when we're talking about the books, or the ending, obviously, of the Fellowship when we look at the movies. Because once again, someone who's a good hero is essentially good, because Boromir is essentially good, gets felled by a shit ton of arrows, and then people sing about him. His burial is about singing. And obviously that is because that stuff's inspired by traditions, but I just wanted to point it out. And I'm not sure if Cam Esslemont like deliberately echoed that scene in a more gritty, more anthropological way, anthropology-based way of describing that kind of ritual, but it just like struck a chord with me this morning when I read it. So I figured I'll just point it out, because why not? All right. So what else is there to talk about before we end this for today? Well, there certainly is a lot going on down at the sea. We see there's a whole army of gold, like fortune seekers, raiders, pirates, gold seekers, whatever, down there, and we see the whole squalor of that through Jude's eyes when they show up with at Wrong Turn. And I feel there's like a bunch of things that are important to be pointed out. It has the vibe of a boomtown. It is very much described as that. And while we've seen a lot of boomtowns in Western movies and whatnot, there's always that weird romanticism in a lot of like Westerns when they depict the so-called Old West. And no, that shit's terrible. People are just there to get hammered because it's a high-risk, high-adrenaline kind of lifestyle in general. You're squabbling, you're scrabbling to get by, and all kinds of drug abuse is basically the only way you can get through all of that. Because let's face it, that stuff takes an enormous toll on your mental state. You're already probably pretty desperate before you actually go there. That's sort of like the backstage, not the background of that kind of thing. However, there's obviously more to that. And that is, you always have strong men moving in, which is, because those places are essentially lawless. They they make good arguments if you want to defend Thomas Hobbes' idea of human society, unfortunately. And we see that there as well. We also, and this is, I feel, the other important aspect there is that everyone there is running for the gold, right? Wealth. And this is where we come to the whole like capitalism problem once again. It's like, there's that saying that you can't eat gold. Well, it's true, but because of most of us humans being stuck in that mindset, in that system, where monetary wealth is seen as the end goal or part of the end goal of a lot of things, what we tend to do is we give up a lot of stuff that might actually be enough for a good life, or like at least a decent sustainable life, in order to get that gold and then exchange it again for all the things we actually need to live. And this is ridiculous, of course, but it's how far we have sunk into that mindset, right? And while like such a boomtown as this is sort of the almost the caricature of how this kind of thing works, it is a good image because it's sort of what we all do all the time, on like mostly, hopefully, less of a brutal level, but the whole like stress, using drugs to deal with that stress, running for all that stuff, that's how it works, right? Which, it's capitalism for you. One or two final things that I guess we should look at here is what happens to Jude, because they get like kind of co-opted into what is going on with Cartheron Crust, who is apparently working for the Empire right now. And the important thing here to understand is, I mean, two of those things, right? One of them is he goes in there and gets all these former Malazan veterans to join up with him, which shows that for a lot of people, like a lot of soldiers, once again, you're used to that specific lifestyle. It's like you return to that army because it's sort of what gives you, meaning, structure, all those good things that you kind of forgot how, got so used to that you can't deal without them in like the real world, which makes living in the real world so difficult for a lot of veterans, whatever strife. The other side, however, is that organization in general beats chaos, unfortunately. Or maybe not unfortunately, we don't know. What do I mean by this? Like the Malazan structure of a structured army with the training and all of these things is totally able to take down the bullies, strongmen, and whatnot of of the so-called Baron of Wrong Turn. With no problem. It also means that if you're a civilian like Jude, and the army does these kind of things, you get co-opted really easily, and it's that specific power that the army has, or that any army has, that any armed forces have. That's just the same power that those bullies have, just like writ larger and more well trained, and well, hopefully the Malazan Empire is using that power, or hopefully anyone who has that kind of power wields it in an appropriate way, but we can never know that, which is why I feel being skeptical of of armed forces, whether they are heroic like Malazan Marines or not, doesn't really matter. It's like, be careful of that shit. Alright, one final thing, and then we'll leave it, is another horror story, because we have the whole... I forgot to talk about the Mist story, which is just really cool, to have Lady Mist in Castle Mist, and using arms of fog. We spoke about fog being like taking away a lot of like agency by taking away our visibility. Now we have that manifest in an even more brutal way. I don't know if any of you have ever watched that like 60s, 70s horror movie about the fog, that kind of thing. But yeah, like mist and fog can be really scary, and having like tentacles of mist drag in all these people and force them to work for her through sorcerous means. Yeah. It's pretty fucking scary is what it is. And I appreciate it. Like, I appreciate it for being pretty fucking scary is what I'm saying here. So that's just really cool. And the whole setup with... apparently, we see more of that whole Jagut connection. That Assail is still very much connected to the Jakku as one of the last kind of lands and countries out there. So there's that, and I just wanted to mention that because I really love that horror story. And then we have like one final thing, which is obviously a downer, and then we'll leave it. We have the conversation of the Kerloom with Lannis Tog and others. That they have to go and eradicate those people. And others will blame them, but and in the end they'll all come around, and it's always them sacrificing themselves and doing the hard work and so forth. And this is a problem, because this is the mindset that a lot of radical people have, whether it's religious radicals, but more so even the right wing, fascists, racists. That's always them. It's like they are sacrificing themselves for the common good, and they're like despised by now, but like later when they're done with their thing, everyone else will actually come around and hopefully thank them for what they have done. It's what the Polish government, the Hungarian government is doing in the EU right now. It's how you justify genocides and shit, right? It's terrifying. It's absolutely horrific, but it's a form of mindset that it's so easy to fall into when you, like, on a personal level, right? When you try to justify something that you kind of in your heart know is kind of wrong, and you started justifying it for yourself as like it is necessary, and at the end people will thank me for it, and so forth. It's like sometimes it's kind to be cruel, it's necessary to be cruel. That kind of fucking mindset, and it's absolutely fucked up, horrific, and we need to find a way to solve it. And seeing those Talan en masse justify a genocide through it, yeah, kind of fits, is what I'm saying here. So yeah, don't do that. Don't think that way. Not on a personal level, not on a global level. Be kind to people. It's the withholding of emotions that is the greater crime. So yeah, with those nice words, if I can't make it onto like another video until I'm back from Christmas stuff, yeah, happy fucking holidays. Have a beer on me. Thanks for watching all this time. Like, subscribe, share, tell everyone. I'm still hoping out that I may just reach the 700 by the end of the month, but I'm doubting this is possible. But maybe there's a miracle of Christmas. Who knows? Maybe the ghost of future subscribers will visit my channel. We'll see. Until then, see ya. Cheers.